For our first tank here, we're going to have Rein, and for Rein, holding a corner or a solid piece of cover will always be your best bet when positioning, as especially in metal ranks, shield management can be a heavily underutilized difference maker in making sure that you can not one just protect your team, but also importantly protect yourself so that you don't get lobby focused. And onto our next, we have Roadhog, and similar to our man from before, holding cover and holding corners, especially with your trap, is extremely important for a big hitbox like Hog. High damage pressure, support cooldowns, speed, and tank counters all have great ability to run this dude over in Season 13 with all the speed. So if you're thinking about Hog and you're thinking he might be really hard to play right now, you probably wouldn't be wrong. And onto our next, we have Sigma, and remember when positioning with this character that he is a poke tank. So that means keep your distance. I see many metal ranked players make the mistake of pushing in far too fast during the mid fight or wanting to close the distance for some reason, but in reality, actually understanding your angles and distance control is very, very important to getting those really big hypersphere damage. And further down the list, we have Mauga, and Mauga is all about playing keep away. Use corners to get easy burn targets without taking much damage back. Use that to build cage fight. Then when targeted or trying to get pressure down, use his very interesting and uncounterable run, get to cover, then since you have the fattest hitbox in the game, get topped up very fast, rinse and repeat. Next up, onto a more mobile character, we have Ball, and as Ball, I would say the most important part when positioning is to understand what cooldowns their team has, which you need to avoid. This can be Sombra hack, this could be Doom Punch, this could be a Torb turret, but similar to Monkey, manipulating their team's attention with flanks is key, and as much as you might want to go for the 5-man pile drives, you probably shouldn't. Similar to other brawl tanks, when positioning as Zarya, corners, cover, and patience will be your best friend, as keeping a tab on your support sightlines and staying healthy before the team fight is a key part of Zarya's playstyle, as walking into a backline with full charge and bubbles can be the enemy team's worst nightmare. Next up, we have Orisa, and as Orisa, this is probably going to be one of the least exciting characters to position or really play at all, but save your Fortify for their offensive cooldowns and make sure to anchor a position, especially an important corner or whether this is Karq or a point. And remember that Orisa does not have fall off damage anymore, so when you combine that with her really large bullets, she could actually be quite a threat at range, but other than that, kinda AFK. Next up is Ramattra, and as this character, you're gonna want to hold your Omnic form, shield, and possibly cover for as long as you can. Then when they close the distance to try to pressure you out, grab that 400 Nemesis armor, and then with patience, a Ravenous Vortex and your increased mobility speed can be your best friend for pummeling them. Finally, my GOAT, Monkey. The main mistake I see most ranked players make is actually jumping in out of sync with your team. This, for obvious reasons, is incredibly easy to punish as his cooldowns are really powerful, but they require the correct timing and execution, usually with a teammate. Don't be afraid to sit and wait for a flank from a Genji or an Echo, as his secondary fire poke is definitely nothing to scoff at. And Monkey is quite an interesting character because while you would assume that an aimless jumping baboon in the sky is only good in Plat or something like that, akin to Mercy or Moira, but he's actually a Giga Brain Warlord in top 500 and gets flamed by his entire team in the lower ranks. Hate to see it. Alright, so for the first one on the list here, we're gonna have D.Va. And for positioning with D.Va, I would actually say the most important part is actually learning when to take high ground to sync up possibly with a Genji or a fellow DPS, or when to actually stay with your team and use your armor and mobility to peel for them. Learning how to manage defense matrix and analyzing what's actually threatening your DPS and backline is key to winning these games. Alright, and for our next one here, we have Junker Queen. And for Junk Queen, I would say people underestimate using her regular movement and gun and maybe her knife since it's on a short cooldown if you see the opportunity. But if not, I'd recommend holding your cooldowns, especially ones like Shout, as you could get 700 HP for when you close the distance. And then remember that Junk Queen has really good self-healing now, so you could stay in the fight for a way longer time. Finally, onto the DPS category. Similar to probably a lot of hit scan DPS, holding the high ground and holding evade ability like Coach Gun for the enemies engage is crucial to making sure you could survive on high ground and get the best sightlines for your shots and for also your dynamite. My one position tip for Bastion would be to not play this character and load up another character. But if you do, be patient with his turret form and wait for their tank to invest their cooldowns or the enemy team, as you can be a very easy focus fire target with reduced speed and his very fat hitbox. Moreover, be careful when outside of turret form, because while he does have more health since his latest reworks and at 350, he is still a sitting duck for hit scans, dives, burst damage, and a lot more. Like I said before, don't play this character. On to my man Cassidy, and very similar to Ashe, saving your cooldowns like his damage reduction roll and his really good stun for the enemies engaged is very crucial to making sure that you can maintain high ground and get the best angles for your sightlines, especially when paired with high noon. Yep, not much to say here. And next up on the list we have Genji, and for Genji, making use of his passive mobility combo of his wall climb and his double jump is great for getting high ground, but also for evading damage and getting dive angles. But more importantly, off of those dive angles, syncing off of another teammate's damage with dash is quite important, as it's quite common for lower ranked players to dash in alone, use deflect, and either lose the pick or just die completely. And for our next DPS on this list, we have Echo, and positioning with Echo is quite difficult because she's probably one of the highest skill ceiling DPS characters in the entire game. So to help you guys out, I got my good longtime friend Relcz, who also has a YouTube channel. He makes a bunch of Doors content, Destiny 2, bunch of stuff. Make sure to check him out and you'll take it from here.
Now for Echo, you're gonna want to let the enemies aggress first, like Yosh, then use Flight's burst mobility to get distance control for easy sticky bombs, then also get high potential for the finish with the insane DPS focus beam. When using dupe, you're gonna want to make sure that you're high in the air and elevated in flight to catch them off guard, and make it easy for the team to follow up.
When playing Hanzo, similar to most of the sniper or hit scan characters, you're going to want to make use of that passive wall climb mobility to get that high ground, to get those free season 13 one shots, or even in more niche scenarios, using it as vertical mobility to maybe evade a Rein or a Doomfist. One thing I would say to avoid the most when positioning with Junkrat is to actually avoid the low ground, as shooting up with Junk's slow moving projectiles is an easy way to beat down a DPS almost every single fight. Instead, opt for more of a flank approach, as Junkrat did just recently get his one-shot combo back for every squishy. When playing Mei, looking at your tank will almost always decide your positioning playstyle, as if you have a brawly comp akin to a Rein, Zarya, Ram, play more close to the team and look for wall opportunities so that they could run the enemy tank over. If you have a poke comp, Sig or Mauga set, play more angles and more occasional walls with more secondary fire just to build up the blizzard. And then if you have more of a dive comp akin to a Monkey, Diva, or Doom, look for more flanks, as Mei does not have the mobility or range to contribute much to the fight. Since Pharah's most recent rework, she went from a kind of trash AC 130 just chilling in the sky to a hyper mobile burst damage assassin. So for my playtime, using her vertical mobility as long as the speed granted from it is key to accessing flank routes that other players can't. Then from there, it's just free kills with all of her damage and hitbox buff. And now on to Reaper. And let me just say, I have quite a bit of playtime on this character in season 13, and he is nothing to mess around with. With Reaper, you're gonna want to make use of his insane teleport range and quickness to get out of it, to then get use of some cover and then get some fat self-healing damage. Then, if you get that or you don't, use Wraith and possibly a whole nother TP, because you'll probably have the cooldown backup to get out and back into the safety of your team. I love this character. And when starting to fight with Sojourn, patience with Sojourn's power slide will actually be one of the most pivotal things, as it can be an incredibly potent tool in either pushing to get an extra pick or kiting back possibly from an enemy ultimate. Another trick you could do is to use her disruptor shot defensively on the ground, since it does even more damage now in season 13 and even charges her railgun. Next up, onto Torbjorn, and for Torbjorn, a lot of players, including me in the past, assumed the best positions would still be with the turret in the backline getting flanks while Torb still plays in the front line. but this is not the case anymore. A lot of the best Torbjorn players right now are instead opting to play more with their turret on a flank angle and constantly healing it. This makes a lot of sense because Torb, while before he was a little bit undiveable with his overload, can now be focused down really easily post hitbox changes. And now instead, if you play with your 225 HP turret shooting them down while they're trying to kill him, he could be a lot more tanky. Still watch out for hit scan characters as they could still focus him down, but other than that, this guy is a tank. Alright, next up, when starting the team fight as Sombra, instead of pushing into the objective, you're actually going to want to use her increased movement speed with stealth to make it back to the spawn room. The spawn room actually has a unique property to allow you to switch any current character that you're playing on. Then, once you make it back to the spawn room, find the Y key on your keyboard, press it, and then switch to any other DPS. All of this will maximize your potential for winning the match. Now moving on to probably the most complex DPS character in the game, Tracer. And this is obviously a tough one. One, because I'm actually not that good at her, but two, because the best players are oftentimes not even playing the same game as us. Make sure to always play around cover and have a recall or a couple of extra blinks in the back pocket, as you do have incredible potential to get bursted down, especially after the hitbox changes. But honestly, for 90% of the players this season, I would actually suggest just playing Reaper. When positioning as Soldier, this is probably one of the most simple, easy to digest characters in the game, and his positioning is the same. As you want to play at a good distance with him because he is a sitting duck for many dive threats, but other than that, he's pretty self-explanatory. Hold high ground, get some angles on the supports. When positioning as Venture very much specializes into the attention garnered category, which means that you are going to want to be on the flanks as much as possible. Be sure to use as little cooldowns as you can while closing the distance on those flanks. Then use a tried and true shot, drill shot, and shot, or maybe an extra melee if they're a little tankier, and that will do the trick. From there, all you gotta do is use one of her cooldowns that you saved, and they are both almost guaranteed escapes. When beginning the fight as Symmetra, always make sure to either position or coordinate with a brawl tank or the rest of your team, as looking for teleports can be incredibly powerful, especially on maps like Lijiang Night Market. But mainly when playing Sim, be careful as you are incredibly easy to focus down with little to no mobility, especially when playing against the Season 13 speed and dive comps. Although charging beams against shields can be kinda good, this character kinda sucks right now, not gonna lie. And next up on this list, we probably also have the simplest character on this list, because Widowmaker is very simple to position for. Play long sidelines to stay out of range of cooldowns like Genji dash or Winston jump. For reference point, you're usually going to want to stay at a range so that they have to use more than one ability to close the distance on you. Stay on high ground, hit headshots. Great and interesting character in Overwatch. We love to see it. And finally, onto the support category, and this is also where I see a lot of the worst positioning habits form. But onto one of my favorites, Ana. For Ana, you're going to want to analyze first what characters your team is playing, and then what characters the enemy team is playing. This will tell you exactly how aggressively or passively you could position. Against a Winston, you probably cannot hold high ground to heal your teammate, but against Ryan, you probably could get away with it. It's very common to see lower level players go, "Why is my teammate feeding alone?" But when you adapt to your team's playstyle and try to heal them in the clutch, oftentimes you'll win many games. Ask yourself before every fight, am I safe here, and what teammates do I have LOS to heal? And for the newest and obviously most balanced support character on the support roster, we have Juno. And for Juno, you're always going to want to play in position to pocket your tanks and also the rest of your team, but also in range to speed ring the tanks. Very importantly, this can be to flee the team fight or just to run over the enemy. But getting the max healing out of every sideline is key, as Juno has arguably the best ult in the entire game. Play Juno and learn yourself, because I'm actually not that good at her, but this character is insane right now. Then moving on to Baptiste. With Baptiste, you're going to want to utilize his exo boots and high ground as much as you possibly can, similar to a character like Widowmaker or Ashe. This will make his AoE healing and his immortality field a lot more consistent and potent. Then whenever you get the chance, make sure to get some free DPS with the new Soldier 76 buffs for Season 13. And for the next one in the support category, we have Lifeweaver, and Lifeweaver is also probably the simplest character in the support category. Understand who might be looking to target you and play as a central fountain for your team, and then look to evade the dives of the enemy team as well. Make sure to pocket whoever's dueling mid-fight, and other than that, get the life grips and survive. And talking about Brigitte, the GOAT herself. This is definitely one of my best supports I have, and I could tell you that pressing tab is key on knowing where you can position. Against a lot of brawl tanks like Reinhardt or Zarya, you usually have to stay as far away as possible, but against more dive characters like Ball or Monkey, a lot of the times it's best to play very close to the team to proc Inspire, heal them with that, and then to also possibly move them back with Whip Shot. Patience with your abilities like Whip Shot and Bash will be key to always ensuring your survival and safety. Then onto our next DPS, support character, we have Illari, and very similar to other snipers and hit scans, positioning on high ground will be your best bet as she has massive bullets and damage after season 9. To hold this height though, it's a necessity to put down pylon 2 steps away from the dive so it's harder to kill, and holding outburst. While you might think it's actually better to play with your tank due to her having really short range healing, Illari is almost exclusively played in POCOM, so she could do this exact thing to maximize her own damage while also getting her very high healing per second on her beam output while at a distance. And now it's time we talk about Kiriko, and this is a fun one because the truth is, a lot of Kiriko's current strength is that she could play almost anywhere on the map with her TP and Suzu abilities, but a lot of the times, using her wall climb and kunai shots for your own safety is vital, as it's very common to see other players playing far too close with their tank, burning their TP, and making them very vulnerable, while often using Kiri's strong healing of Fudo range in similar situations can have much better results. Then, moving on to a more self-explanatory or simple character to position with, we have Mercy. And with Mercy, you're going to want to get in the habit of maximizing that beam length and staying out of sightlines as much as possible. If you find yourself constantly flying across the map because your team's too split or you aren't getting those reses secured, then you should probably switch characters, especially in season 13. This then leads us to Moira, which is probably the easiest character to position with due to her having arguably the best escape in the game with her shift. But as Moira, you're going to want to look for possibly good damage orbs if you're running dive to coordinate with a monkey or something. But similar to Mercy, you have extremely short range on all your healing. So if you find yourself constantly pressing shift just to regroup with your team, you should probably switch off. At last, my main man LUCIO. When positioning with LUCIO, the key is to understand the balance of when you should stay with your team so that they could utilize your speed and healing to either kite for fights or to obviously build B and heal for your team, and then when you should go use your mobility to take duels on high ground or maybe to sync up with a fellow DPS. Finally, for our last support character on the list, he also unfortunately happens to be the hardest one, but for Zenyatta, playing as far away as possible while also having sightlines to get the Orb of Discord will be your best bet, as his orbs actually have 0 fall off damage. But if they have dive or if they have a lot of speed, you're either gonna have to rely on your team fully, probably just swap off Zen, because Zen is not very good in season 13. Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of this video, or honestly even clicking on it, as I know you definitely haven't heard of a Yosh before, but I hope you found this educational, or if you could just walk away with one thing that you learned that you could apply to your games, I'll be happy. Or if you found this entire video to be misinformation, which you probably wouldn't be here anymore, but even then, let me know some things I can improve upon, and hope do not show this video to flats. I'm gonna get flamed.